Now, I know because you listen to this show, you love Chicago. In fact, you probably know your community very well. Maybe you're involved in a block club or some other neighborhood organization because you're passionate about the place you live. Well, you might be able to turn that passion into a profession, helping others find neighborhoods that they love with a career in real estate. When you earn your license with Realtors Real Estate School, you'll have access to a community of real estate professionals who can offer guidance and mentorship. Learn how you can get started this summer. Visit realtorsrealestateschool.com/begin.
Make sure you stay tuned after the interview for a conversation sponsored by Ravinia about everything you need to know to make the most of the festival this year. Today on CityCast Chicago, West Loop lost a lot of free parking this summer, which once again has us talking about the city's infamous parking meter deal. It comes up whenever we talk about the city's finances, new public deals with private businesses, and of course, whenever you want to complain about paying $7 an hour on meters downtown. Host Jacoby Cochran talked with one of the reporters who first uncovered just how bad the deal was for Chicago, and we break it down. It's Monday, August 5th. I'm Simona Alicea in for Jacoby, and this is what Chicago's talking about.
Mick Dumke is an investigative reporter and editor for Block Club Chicago. Back in 2009, Mick was part of an investigation series which talked about the city's controversial 2008 parking meter deal. Mick, welcome back to CityCast Chicago.
Hey, thanks for having me again. It's great to be here, even to talk about this horrendous deal.
It's easy to just think about the parking meters when we're out here paying the rates, when we're trying to figure out if it's free, if it's a 24-hour, if it's a loading zone. But I mean, when we really dig into this, it's arguably one of the worst deals the mayor has ever made. So let's go from the very beginning. Can you walk us through what is the parking meter deal?
In December 2008, more than 15 years ago now, the city council, at then Mayor Daley's urging, Mayor Richard Daley, of course, longest serving mayor in Chicago history, the city council at his urging voted 40-5 to approve a deal that essentially privatized the parking meter system. And with it, what was really significant was they privatized the revenue stream from the parking meters. The city cut this deal with a group of investors led by the investment bank Morgan Stanley. And the city at the time was in a really difficult budget situation. Of course, 2008, the housing market is collapsing. The economy is in the tank. The city had just cut a bunch of employees. And so they were looking for some way to try to stabilize the city finances without having a major property tax hike. So they worked up this deal where they would get about $1.2 billion up front. And in return, the city would turn over control of the meters and, most importantly, as I said, the revenue stream from the meters for the next 75 years.
The people we see like monitoring cars and like putting the tickets, do they work for the company or do they work for the city? And then ultimately those tickets, is there any revenue share between the company and the city, or does that money all go to the city?
The city gets all the money from the tickets, but the private company, Chicago Parking Meters, does have people issuing tickets. Through the deal, the city granted them enforcement powers. So it's in their interest to ticket people to make sure people are feeding the meters because that drives up their revenues.
They be out there.
Yes.
They are out there.
They're out there because they have an ongoing contention that the city is not issuing enough tickets. They want people to know that you have to feed the meters or else there's a cost for it.
We're talking 36,000 parking meters at the time around the city of Chicago. Mick, I know it's 15 years ago, but do you have a sense of how much the average parking meter cost at the time?
At that time, they were still the old meters that people who recall, it's not like the boxes and pay by your phone like we have now. They're literally the old metal meters that had up to 2 hours, a little dial on there that showed you how much time you had left. And you had to have a pocket full of quarters. I mean, that was the only way you could feed the meters. And most places around the city, I think it was a quarter for an hour, maybe for a half hour in some places, but the rates were very, very low. That was one of the arguments that the Daley administration and the mayor's allies made, was that, look, we're going to have to raise the rates at some point in time, and now we get to let the parking meter company do it. We don't have to worry about raising the rates. We'll let them do it. The system needed a technological upgrade, obviously, and the meter company's going to take care of that. I mean, look at all these wonderful benefits for the city. Those are some of the arguments that they made, and of course the cash. One alderman after another at the time was saying, $1 billion. Is there any other place we could get $1 billion? And that, I'm not sneezing at it, that's a significant amount of money. But within just a few weeks of the deal being approved, the city's Inspector General, David Hoffman, released a study that found the value of the system was likely several $1 billion at the very least. So even though it seemed like a lot of money up front, it was way undervalued. And the city kind of took this deal, and the city council approved it without enough study to really figure out if it was right for the city and for the taxpayers. Mayor Daley announced that they had a winning bidder on a Monday, maybe it was a Tuesday. The finance committee met the next day and spent a couple hours debating, discussing the deal. Then they voted to approve it. And then the city council had a special session the day after that. And yes, they debated it for several hours. It was a long day, but it was one day. And there's no way that alder people had read this or understood this detailed agreement that went on for well more than 100 pages of legalese. There just was not enough time or capacity. So the whole thing, from the time it was announced publicly to the time it was sealed and approved by the city council, was inside of 5 days for a 75-year deal worth potentially billions of dollars.
I mean, that's $1 billion for 75 years. I mean, that's as bad as that Scotty contract before they started winning all of them chips, and you was just sort of stuck with the payment. I mean, at the time, we get $1.2 billion. Where did that money go? Does the city make any money from this parking meter deal? Like, how does that money ultimately help shore up the budget as they said it was supposed to?
Again, one of the arguments that Mayor Daley and his team made was that this money we're getting up front is going to continue to regenerate. We're going to put this into special funds, and the interest will accumulate over time. And the money we're making annually from the meters, I think it was about $20 million the city was getting from the meter system at the time. And so Mayor Daley and his team said, by stockpiling it, we can make that money and even more in over time in interest. So this is just a great investment for us. The problem, Jacoby, was that didn't happen. A bunch of special funds were set up with the money, and by the time Mayor Daley left office a couple years later, in mid-2011, most of the money had already been spent. And when I checked on this again recently, there's a few $1 million in a couple of the funds, but for all practical purposes, that $1.2 billion is gone. And it's not that it was necessarily wasted, but the city had budget problems, not just in 2008, 2009, but for several years to come. And obviously, we still have budget problems. And so we really did sell off the system. It wasn't the investment they claimed that it would be. We essentially sold off the street parking system, including some control over the street parking system, as well as the revenue stream. And both of those are really important and ultimately catastrophic for the city's finances on into the future.
What's up, y'all? I'm back with another Ravinia Roundup. Yes, another one, and I got more shows. All summer long, North America's longest running outdoor music festival is putting on some of the most enjoyable concerts in the Chicago area, point blank period, and trust me, there is something for everybody. August probably has my favorite run of shows of this entire summer. They got Grammy winners all month long, y'all, with Robert Glasper and Chicago's own Jay Ivey on August 14th, The Roots with Diggable Planets and Arrested Development on August 24th, and they've got some excited Ravinia debuts with Gaelic Storm and the High Kings on August 22nd. I know, that's a lot of names, a lot of dates. Go to the link in our show notes for the full schedule. Remember, you can grab a pavilion seat or pack a lunch for the lawn. Either way, your ride on the Metro is free with your ticket. So pick your concert, buy tickets at Ravinia.org, and treat yourself. Grab yourself some wine. Do it big when you go out there. Once again, that's Ravinia.org. They vote 40-5, but what did the city council think about the plan? Did anybody challenge it? Was there anybody who stood up and said, we shouldn't do this?
There are several layers to this that are all super important and were not well considered. So one was just the deal itself, the money. Okay, so $1.2 billion, like we said, that sounds like a lot of money, but is it really? Who came up with that number? Did anybody do calculations before they voted on this to figure out if that was actually a lot of money or if it should have been much more? The second thing was the length of the deal, Jacoby, 75 years. I mean, how many people thought about what it's going to look like in 75 years? And in over 75 years, did the city have any opportunity to adjust the deal? Was there any flexibility built in?
Opt-out clause, renegotiation years.
Exactly. Revenue sharing. You know, if the parking meter company suddenly makes all kinds of money, if rates go way up or because things happen, people end up using the system more than they had been, is the city going to share in any of those proceeds? That was not discussed because the deal turned over all of the revenues to the parking meter company. The city doesn't get a cut of those 36,000 meters that you mentioned going forward.
In fact, they have to pay when some of those meters go out of service for city construction, for a biking event, for a street festival.
That's right. So that's another layer to this so we've got the money. We should have gotten more of it. There's the length of the deal. It was way too long with way too little flexibility. And then there's the control of the city streets. People may forget or not think about this. I mean, I never thought about it before this came up, but parking meters exist not just to generate revenue. They also exist to manage traffic and to manage the use of streets. You put parking meters in where you want people to park, you allow them to park, but you want some sort of turnover in the parking. Like local businesses don't want somebody, parking a big truck, taking up several spots and being there all day. They want customers to be able to come and go. We as a city, the city officials have to put meters into place and to take them out of service on a regular basis for all kinds of things. Is there a water line that broke or needs repair work? Is there a street festival? Is there some kind of road construction where we need to take meters out of service? So the way the deal was constructed, essentially the city has to pay the parking meter company every time a certain number of spaces are taken out. And the threshold is quite low. So essentially, every time you take a meter out of service, we're going to have to pay money back to the parking meter company. And that has already cost the city tens of millions of dollars over the life of this deal. So not only did we not get enough money up front, but we have paid a chunk of that back already in the first 15 years. I looked up some of my old reporting on this. Older people knew that there were what are called these, what we're talking about is called true-up payments, that there was essentially a penalty for taking meters out of service. But they really didn't talk in any detail about what that cost would add up to. And I'm quite certain, either the city officials and the outside lawyers who helped the city put this deal together, either they grossly underestimated the costs of the true-up payments, or the fix was in altogether, because it's really it's just a shameful and extremely expensive part of this deal that we're going to continue to pay for 6 more decades.
How soon after this deal goes through do Chicagoans start asking questions like, hold on, what is going on? Because again, I imagine the rollout of like the new parking meter deals and the rates, these things don't happen immediately. But like when this deal is announced and in the months and years after, how soon is Chicagoans like, this is fishy?
Almost immediately, it was a debacle because in fairness to the parking meter company, it wasn't all their fault. You would walk down the street in those days sometimes, and there would be meters covered with plastic bags. That was a common sight because the meters were no longer functional, and people who parked in those spaces didn't want to get a ticket. So they'd put a bag over the meter to tell the city's ticket issuers that, hey, this one doesn't work. So what happened was the parking meter company almost immediately started to raise the rates, but half the meters didn't work, or you couldn't come up with the quarters, or they got stuck in the machine. So people were initially just pissed off because the meters literally didn't work. And so people were getting ticketed. So that was the first phase. The second phase was when like Ben Joravsky and I were at the Reader, Ben, my friend and former colleague, we started looking into this, and some other people started looking into this, some transportation advocates, some bike advocate people, and everyone started to realize that this had just been done so hastily that there were all these side effects. And then as we started looking into exactly how the deal came together and how the city got lowballed, we started asking for records, like who else bid on this? What were the bids? It was so cloaked in secrecy, the whole thing. And it had happened so fast, Jacoby, that it was almost like after the city council voted on it that everyone kind of realized, wow, that was just outrageously irresponsible.
All right, let's kind of fast forward to now, 15 years in. How has this investment paid off for the parking meter company? Have they made back their original $1.2 billion plus some?
Yes, they have. Within 10 years, Chicago Parking Meters had made back the money that they had paid upfront for the deal. So they had 65 years ahead of them where the revenues were profits for them. And they've continued to make money. The amount of revenue they've made has varied through the years a little bit. It's gone up and it's gone down. Obviously, the pandemic, they had a big drop in revenues in the year 2020, but they quickly rebounded. And the biggest year yet for their revenues, they reported, was in 2023, almost $151 million. And just to remind you again, the city made about $20 million the last year it controlled the system. So through the increase in meter rates, in improvements in technology, and in some cases, the expansion of the number of meters and the placement of meters, they have figured out how to wring more and more money out of this.
I'm going to sit with that big NBA, NFL salary number for a second. Obviously, Mick, I don't want there to be more parking meters. I didn't want the rates to go up. I didn't want the city to prioritize parking. But what does it say, or how does it feel knowing that potentially all of that money in some ways could have been the city of Chicago's to use for so many of the crises we have at our feet now, where the answer is we don't have more money? I mean, being one of the people in the room when the deal was being voted on to now and calculating those missed revenue numbers. I mean, like what does that feel like?
Oh, it feels awful. I mean, this is one of those instances where you don't want to be right about something. And those 5 people who voted against the parking meter deal, I continue in my own mind to revere for their foresight, or at least their skepticism. And, I just give them a shout out. Scott Waguespack, still in the city council. Tony Preckwinkle, now the Cook County board president. Billy Ocasio, who is the executive director of the Puerto Rican Museum in Humboldt Park now. Ray Colon, former alderman, no longer serving, and Leslie Hairston, who served in the city council through last year when she retired from the council. Those were the only people who had the foresight to say no. And, it's important to note this was an era when the city council was largely a rubber stamp. Mayor Daley got almost everything he wanted out of the city council. And this is just like the most outrageous example of it.
Yeah, recently West Loop said goodbye to free parking. Melody Mercado, your colleague over at Block Club, reported that the city installed hundreds of metered spots in recent weeks and almost 400 are coming. It was a part of former Mayor Lori Lightfoot's plan to bring in more money for the city budget by raising rates and adding metered street parking. I mean, one, can you explain how that can be a part of the mayor's plan? Does that just simply mean that the hope is to get more ticket revenue since you're not getting any of the parking meter revenue? And also, we're a few mayoral administrations removed. And how does the current city council and the current mayor's administration continue to answer for this deal?
That's a great question. And it gets to some of the weedy parts, technical parts of this deal. So I'll try not to bore everybody, but under the terms of the agreement, the contract, most of the meters in the city are controlled by Chicago parking meters, and those are called concession spaces. However, there are thousands of other meters that the city controls itself, and they are called reserve spaces. The city can kind of do what it pleases with them. And the city gets like 85% of the money from the reserve spaces. And then it pays the parking meter company like 15% of the money just to do the maintenance and administrative kind of stuff with it. So I don't know how much of that money is going to go to the meter company. But obviously, if she thought this was going to help the budget, there's at least a significant number of these new spaces that the city controls directly and will be getting some money from. You're right about every mayor and every city council since this deal was put into place having to reckon with it in one way, shape, or form. So I can tell you, I've been studying some of the maneuvers that Lori Lightfoot did and some that she attempted. And she and her team tried to figure out some ways to move meters in and out of the concession system that would help the city's financial picture and maybe lessen some of its burden to the meter company. Some of them worked and some of them did not work. But I think what's going on in the West Loop is these are mostly reserve spaces where the money is going to go to the city budget.
I mean, there has to be, we talk about the bad negotiating, the gross underestimating on the side of the city and their lawyers. Whoever was negotiating on the side of the parking meter company probably got a plaque in some office somewhere.
One thing I learned through this and through studying various other kinds of privatization deals, or as they're often spun, public-private partnerships, is that government has a different mission than private industry, obviously. Private industry is in business to make money. The government is supposed to serve the citizens and provide provide different kinds of services and or protections. And when you're cutting a financial deal with an investment bank staffed by people whose job it is to figure out creative ways to make money
in the long term.
Or in the long term.
Not right
in the
now,
long term.
not tomorrow, right?
Exactly. And the city's job is completely different from that. I mean, there's almost no way, if you just think about it logically, that the city was going to come out on top on this. The other side knew what they were doing. But as I've been studying this again lately, it's quite clear to me that, that's the bottom line. The city is required to help the parking meter company make money. Not literally, like not a certain amount of money, but if the city does things that damage the long-term value of the meter system, then the parking meter company and the investors who own it have all kinds of recourse, financial and legal recourses. That's why I say, as bad as this deal looked at the beginning, I just think it keeps getting worse and worse.
After everything we've heard today, this may be a dumb final question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there any way we can get out of this deal?
I hope so. People have looked at it. There have been 2 lawsuits filed by citizens groups and public interest people. They're both eventually tossed out, in large part because the city, despite after Mayor Daley complaining about this deal, both Rahm Emanuel and Lori Lightfoot had city lawyers defending the deal in court. So there have been a couple swings and misses. So what you would need, Jacoby, is you would need some very, very smart lawyers who have some time to go over this thing with a rake and figure out, are there any loopholes? Are there any legal outs? And then secondly, are there any financial outs? Is there any possible way the city could somehow buy the system back and then pay it off over time, with bond issues or something like that? And I'm neither a legal scholar nor a financial expert, and so I'm not the person to figure this out. But if anybody out there listening is one of those things, you would be a hero for the ages in the city of Chicago if you could figure out some way to get rid of the yoke of the parking meter deal.
I want to give another huge thank you to investigative reporter and editor with Block Club Chicago, Mick Dumke. Mick, thank you for making time for us as always.
Hey, thanks for having me on to talk about the parking meter deal of all things. As you can tell, I continue to be very passionate about it. I think it is one of the ongoing, most important political and financial stories in the city. So thanks for talking about it. Thanks for having me on.
For more information about the new parking meters in West Loop, check the link in the show notes. But don't go anywhere. Up next, we've got a conversation sponsored by Ravinia. I'm with artistic producer Eric Soderstrom to talk about what to watch and other tips for the festival this summer.
Hi, Simone. Great to be with you today.
We are big Ravinia fans over here at CineCast, I gotta say. And Ravinia really is a household name around Chicagoland. But can you tell me a little bit more about Ravinia's mission and history?
Ravinia is celebrating 120 years this year. 1904 is our founding. We're the oldest North American outdoor music festival, and we do about 100 events from mid-June to mid-September every year. Chicago Symphony Orchestra is in residency for 6 weeks, and we also present a wide variety of other forms of music, whether it's jazz, blues, hip-hop, rock and roll, progressive rock, bluegrass, you name it. We try to have a little bit of something for everyone at Ravinia each summer. We also have a very strong commitment to music education. Our music education department is called Reach, Teach, Play.
We're going to talk a little bit more about the music education part of Ravinia's mission, but I really want to touch on something that you were getting at, which is I think people really underestimate the diversity of Ravinia's lineup every single year. And so I'm going to ask you, this is going to be the hardest question of the interview, I promise. If you had to narrow it down to just one show that you could see this year, what performance are you most looking forward to?
I would say Samara Joy. She's going to be with us at the end of August. Young jazz singer. I think she's maybe 25 years old, but has this voice of a wise, seasoned jazz singer.
So luckily, I am not going to make you narrow it down to just one concert. I'm actually hoping that you will play a little game with me. So what's going to happen is I am going to give you a person or an outing, and like if you had to take X, which 2024 Ravinia concert would you take them to? So for example, if you were like Simone, you have to take your mom. I would say we're going to go see The Roots on August 24th.
Oh, that's a great choice.
So Eric, let's say you had to bring a group of kids. Which concert would you bring them to?
We're doing Disney's Up later in August. The score is an Oscar-winning score, and the storyline is cute and fun, a little bit sad, but mostly a Disney production that is a must-see for anyone with kids.
Yeah, that's happening August 17th. The night before is going to be Princess Bride in concert as well. Another favorite film of mine. What if you are bringing a date to Ravinia?
TLC and Shaggy is a good date night. That should get everyone in the mood, right, for some fun. And, you know, if your date is a little bit more rock and roll, then maybe you come see ZZ Top or OAR towards the end of the summer. Or if your date is a little bit more Americana or rockabilly, then I would suggest Jason Isbell in September.
Last one, let's say you've got a big group. All your friends are coming, birthday, bachelorette, you're packing a picnic on the lawn. Where are you taking them?
That big group, I think, would be Princess Bride, as you mentioned earlier. It's such a classic film. It's so funny.
The other one I was thinking was the Voice of Whitney Houston on August 30th. Just something very dancey, very nostalgic, very, very upbeat.
Yeah, this is a really unique program. Her estate has commissioned this program, and Ravinia is the first place where it will be premiered worldwide.
In addition to getting me into that festival, the ticket does a lot more than that. Number one, it supports some of those music education opportunities that you were talking about. How does that work? What kinds of education is happening? And what are you doing in Chicago?
Yeah, every ticket that's purchased, a piece of that, the proceeds go to our Reach, Teach, Play programs. We have an entire department of music teachers that are out in the schools all year round, even in the summertime in the libraries and other places. And they are teaching certain instruments to young students who don't otherwise have access to music. And so in some of these communities, Lawndale, for example, there is an entire orchestra that has now been created over the years. So it's the heartwarming piece of what Ravinia does. We're quite proud of it. And it touches thousands of community members across Chicagoland.
My ticket can also help me actually get from Chicago to Ravinia in Highland Park via the Metra. Can you explain how that works?
Honestly, the Metra is the reason we exist. The Metra created the Ravinia Park back in 1904 as a place for people to come and see the suburbs and also enjoy some amusements. And so you can take the Metra from anywhere on that North Line all the way down in the city of Chicago and almost all the way up to Milwaukee for free. Your Ravinia concert ticket is a free round-trip Metra ticket on the night of the concert.
So I think this just brings me to my last question, which is, where can we buy a ticket?
Yeah, absolutely. The most important question. Ravinia.org is the website for purchasing tickets, and we're just getting started with the season. So there's plenty to offer all the way until mid-September, and we hope to see you all on the Ravinia lawn.
I am definitely going to try to make my way out there this summer. Definitely one of my summer bucket list goals. Eric, thank you so much again for being here. Check out ravinia.org to learn more, and we're going to have that link for you in the show notes as well. Eric, thanks again.
Thank you,
And And some good news before we let you go. Speaking of block clubs, Melody Mercado, she's got the profile on the weightlifters who backed up Chapel Roan during Lollapalooza. They came from gyms in Lakeview, and a super special shout out to Inez Carrasquillo, who is also 2024's strongest woman in North America. You should definitely read it and check out the pictures. We've got a link in the show notes. Jacoby is back in the host chair tomorrow, and I promise that means less Chapel Roan talk. We'll have your next news roundup, so we'll talk to you then.